Hello, Chandra Manning of Citizen Historians. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to let our Prologue audiences and Prologue family know a bit about Citizen Historians.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me, Tia. Citizen Historians we like to call it a crowd to cloud effort to really come together and steward shared resources that belong to all Americans, not to one administration and not just to people in Washington and not even to one generation. Uh, the origins of citizen historians really began with the executive order to restore truth and sanity to American history, which came out in March of 2025, and in which the administration announced that it really wanted to see history in public places replaced with kind of a fable or a lullaby or a fairy
Mm,
tale, a
mm,
version of the past where there was never any conflict, there's never any disagreement, and only certain people counted. And so that was a troubling, that troubled me as a historian, both as a professor of history, but also as a former National Park Service ranger, somebody who cares a lot about
mm.
how we talk about our history in public. Well, that happened in March. Over the course of last summer, changes did start to get made to National Park Service interpretive signage,
Okay.
and a project called Save Our Signs cropped up to really take back how we talk about history in national parks. And Save Our Signs invited people visiting parks to photograph what they saw there, to photograph the signs, the interpretive materials, the exhibits when they visited, to save them before more changes happened. And I was inspired by that, and I went to parks and I took pictures and I mailed them in. And then in August of 2025, the president sent a letter to the secretary of the Smithsonian, essentially announcing the intention to do the same thing in the Smithsonian. Now, the Park Service is in the Department of the Interior. It does report directly to the executive branch, so it's easier to make changes there quickly. The Smithsonian has a more independent structure. It is not in the executive branch. So that created a little bit of space to try and resist a bit. And so my colleague, Jim Millward, and I got together and thought about what could we do to safeguard the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
Jim is a
Yeah.
historian of China, and so
Mm,
these efforts reminded him more of things he was used to studying in China, particularly under the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, and its dictate to tell history well. That made him very nervous. He didn't expect to see that kind of move here. And
wow.
so we got together to think about, well, what could we do? And I mentioned the Save Our Signs project, but we knew we would need to modify it a little bit. Save Our Signs is a
Mm,
wide open call. Anybody can take a photograph and send it in. And I knew that we
okay.
did not have the data security skills
Yeah.
to have that wide open. So we made up a new structure. We made up a structure where we would get volunteers in advance and then assign individuals to a particular gallery of the Smithsonian or a particular
Mm,
exhibit, have people take pictures of what they were assigned, and then give everybody access to one digital folder for their exhibit. And
wow.
so we sent a call out via email and actually Jim's neighborhood listserv, the listserv where they do
Yay.
things like talk about, hey, don't let your dog in on my grass, that listserv. And said, who would be interested in taking part? And the response was really overwhelming. There were hundreds of
Mm,
people within 2 weeks. One of those people, to our great good fortune, was a graduate student named Jessica Dickinson Goodman, who has a lot of experience in campaigns of various sorts, but also better tech and data skills. So Jessica really was the brains behind the organization in terms of how we could put this thing together. So we created a folder structure for all the museums of the Smithsonian, plus the Holocaust Museum, because that one seemed particularly vulnerable as well. We
yeah.
created a folder structure modeled on as if you walk into the museum, what do you come to? Um, and then we took the call for volunteers, and we said, okay, of all of you who have volunteered, who would be interested in serving as a museum captain in charge of a particular museum? Got
Mm,
museum captains, and then we gave captains the name and contact information for volunteers who wanted to participate but not be a captain. So captains each took charge of their museum, and assigned particular exhibits, particular galleries to particular volunteers, and the rest is just regular people who, armed with nothing more than a pair of sneakers and a cell phone, headed into
Mm,
the Smithsonian to take a picture of how things stood. So that first letter went out on August 20. Our first call for volunteers went out on August 22nd.
okay.
The Smithsonian closed because of the government shutdown on October 10th. That's an
Mm.
intervening space of 7 weeks. And in those 7 weeks, our volunteers took over 50,000 photographs and they captured the whole thing. That's how it looked.
Wow.
Um, and that to me is one of the most exciting things. These were people, just regular, ordinary people. These were students, these were retirees, these were young families. They were just people who really insisted that the Smithsonian doesn't belong to one person, it belongs to
Mm,
all of us. And all of us right now need to come together to safeguard it. And so now we're kind of cleaning up the data a little, getting the database into sort of tip top shape, but it is all preserved and it is possible for us now to check
mm,
and see, have things changed or have they stayed the same. And someday we do hope to release it as a public, as a public resource that
nice.
anybody who wants to know what did the Smithsonian look like at this date and time can go and check. Now, I want
Mm,
to really, really emphasize that we're not museum professionals. The Smithsonian work, employees themselves are history professionals, are museum professionals who have made beautiful images of everything, all
mm,
of their work. They've done very professional work. We don't see our work as a replacement and certainly not a critique of that work, but we're outside the Smithsonian, they're inside it. So, who knows what pressures they could be put on under in
mm,
future. This now exists as an independent resource, an independent archive, really, of how things looked, and also a testament to the power of people coming together around the
mm.
shared purpose of stewardship. And there's really truly something powerful in that. At least I think there is.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. And as a story too, I already knew what your work was, but to hear you tell it was, I'm surprised by how moving I found it.
Oh, well,
Um, yeah, that's beautiful. How can anyone interested now in supporting your work or somehow being part of it find out more or join up somehow?
sure. The short answer, the first thing to do is to go to our website, which is citizenhistorians.org. Citizen Historians as all one word, no caps, followed by org. And there's a sign up for our newsletter button on there. And the newsletter frequently. That comes out right now. It comes out once a week. It's going to go down in frequency over the summer, but it comes out regularly, and it has calls for volunteers in it.
Mm,
The initial photographing, the initial documentation was done by October, but we're still constantly looking for people to go back and check to tell us what things look like now. Um,
mm,
Additionally, we've started to branch out to non-Smithsonian resources here in Washington, like the National Gallery and the Library of Congress. And so
nice.
as we continue expanding, we'll call for more volunteers to help with those things. Um, Anybody who happens to live or will be traveling outside of the DMV, the Smithsonian sends traveling exhibits around the sites, Smithsonian
Mm,
Institution Traveling Exhibit Service. So we recently did a call for people to help document some of those traveling exhibits going
wow.
around. So those kinds of there will be plenty of work for many hands. So
Yeah.
go to the website, sign up for the newsletter, and that's where the calls for volunteers.
Thank you so much for all of this information and for the beautiful work that you've done and helped others be a part of doing. And thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the good work that you are doing too. We really are all in this together.
We really are. Cheers to that.